Welcome, everyone. I'm Mariquita Solis, the live stream host of all-creatures.org. All-creatures.org was founded in 1998 by Pastor Frank Hoffman and his first wife, Mary, and launched as a pioneer website in the United States for faith-based animal rights veganism. Today, led by our executive director, Tams Nicholson, we exist for all people seeking current animal rights vegan resources and offer decades of free animal rights and vegan content, including a huge repository of vegan sermons and Bible commentaries, animal rights strategies, free vegan authored books, recipes, upcoming events around the world, and the works of various vegan authors, poets, and artists. We host current sites for almost 20 vegan and animal rights organizations, including Stop Crush, Unparalleled Suffering, and the Committee to Abolish Sports Hunting. We also maintain nearly 25 archival sites from animal rights vegan activism of past decades. The bottom line is that we work to unite compassionate and empathetic humans across the globe, from the past and present, who honor the dignity of each and every creature so that all beings thrive on a flourishing planet Earth. So today I'm excited to welcome my good friend, psychologist and vegan educator and author of The Vegan Transformation, Dr. Angela Crawford. Welcome, Angela.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Mariquita.
Well, I'm excited to talk with you because we always explore and we always learn a lot from our conversations. So, and if you're watching, if you're joining us, please let us know where you're joining from, and we'll have a time at the end for question and answers. So, Dr. Angela has many answers she has a lot of solutions and tips for our vegan struggles. So, um, and you never know. We'd love to hear what you offer as your solutions. So, all right, Angela. So tell me, um, how old were you when you went vegan?
Wow. I wish it was sooner.
Hmm.
Um, in sharing my vegan journey, I have to start with becoming vegetarian because that was
Mm,
for ethical reasons and that led to me becoming vegan. But I had just turned 40, and this was 17 years ago, that I went vegetarian. And it was because I saw a program about workers in a meat processing plant, and it showed that they were often injured through their work, and but their employer was trying to discourage them from seeking treatment or taking time off, and it just seemed like very dangerous and kind of pretty horrible work. It didn't really show the details, so I didn't really see the animals or anything like that in the show, but it got me thinking. Like it just for the first time, I think, made me think about how my food got to me and the whole process, that happens. And I'd grown up in the Midwest. I saw the cows in the field, but I didn't know anything about factory farming. And so when I realized, like, I don't like how the workers are treated, I thought, well, if you don't like that, what do you think about what happens to the animals? And the very next day, I bought a vegetarian cookbook. I tried out my first recipe, and I wasn't much of a cook, so it was a big thing for me to do this. But I actually made this vegetarian lasagna that had artichokes and red peppers and spinach, and it was like really good. And I shared it with family, and they all loved it. And it just led me on this journey because I like cooking with plants. It was just so wholesome, and like, I don't know, I just found that I really liked it. And so I started trying new recipes and then reading everything I could. And, as I read more over time, first I committed to, like, I'm not eating meat. That's just it. It's off the plate. And it took me a little bit even for that. I wanted to do it, but learning how to handle social situations was my tough spot, especially with people where I thought, I don't know, that they wouldn't understand or would judge me. But I read enough after a while that I was just like, I have to stand by what I believe in. I can't worry how other people are taking this. So I became vegetarian. And, and I really was moving in that vegan direction, but not fully there until 5.5 years ago. And what helped me to move then, I think maybe I was growing more into my own, where I was learning to trust my own inner knowing and my own values over what society was doing. And I just realized if I want to be true to my values, like dairy and eggs are not good either. You know, the animals in those industries are treated in maybe many ways worse even than in the meat industry, or for a longer time. And then they still go through that same death, so if I didn't want to eat meat, like, supporting the egg and dairy industry or leather or any of that was just as bad. So, I bought the book, The 30-Day Vegan Challenge by Colleen Patrick Gaudreau to support me, to kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this. It was early 2019. I'm going to do this. The book guided you through like seeing where are your blocks, where are your things where you're kind of stuck with making this transition. For me, like finding good breakfasts, for example, or where would I find my toiletry items that weren't from animal testing. So I just used that book to kind of help propel me down the path and overcome things that I found challenging, handling family birthday parties with non-vegan cake and, all those things. How do I handle these situations? And I worked on a plan and then I did it. And so then, that just led down a whole new path of realizing like, it's about more than me. Like, I think when I became vegetarian, I thought this is a personal lifestyle change that I'm making to live aligned with my ethics. And as it turned out, it was also good for my health. But being vegan was even more than that. It was like, I think I made the connection with how everything is interconnected, how what we eat is connected to my spirituality, to what happens to the planet, to all sentient beings, to human health, to human food availability, all kinds of areas. I just realized that interconnectedness. And so that kind of led me down the path to like, the book and everything else. So kind of a long answer to your question of when I became vegan, but it was definitely a journey, and it didn't happen overnight. But once I made that connection, it's become really central to who I am and what I value.
Well, I love that you say it's a journey. It didn't happen overnight, because I think I see a lot of people getting frustrated when others don't have a very quick transition from eating meat to veganism. And I mean, for me, I was vegetarian, vegan, so, and so people have said that I really wasn't vegan, but I feel like I was, but I was a human being that made mistakes. So I'm glad that you say that it's a journey. And why do you think it's so harder for some than others?
Yeah. First I can relate to that kind of being frustrated, because I think we want to see a compassionate world. And so once we make that connection, we think like if we share it with others, they'll make the connection too, just as we did, and it will just happen. And yet over and over again, most of us are finding that doesn't necessarily happen. And I had to just take a step back and think about, well, first, my work as a psychologist, like for 25 years, I was a psychotherapist, until fairly recently. And so I worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over those years, trying to help them make changes. And, it wasn't veganism, it was other changes, but just seeing that change itself can be so hard for people and be such a path of, going through stages and having setbacks and learning how to pick up from those setbacks. So I had to remember that change itself has a process. And then on top of that, as vegans, we're minorities, we're, they say maybe 3% of the population. So, when you're trying to make a change and you're going against the sort of established systems around you, that I think is harder. And I think sometimes we as vegans forget that, like we forget how hard it was for us, many of us anyway, and that even if, someone became vegan overnight, probably a lot of seeds were planted before then that kind of maybe weren't even thought about or recognized. And then something happened that made, you ready. But apparently not everybody is changing at the same pace. I mean, that's just a reality that we're having to face. And that, I would add too, like one thing I've discovered, like in my reviewing research, is that one of the biggest reasons that people give for why they maybe are hesitant to become vegan or have trouble fully sticking with it is the social factor, that being that different person, at a social gathering or, with your family. For some people, that's a real challenge they have to be very committed to learn how to overcome. And so recognizing that this is a challenge for people, and how do we support them? How do we help them on that journey?
Right. And did you have supports when you first became vegan?
Yeah, gosh. I didn't have a lot. First of all, fortunately, my husband was very supportive in the sense that, I don't think he immediately embraced all of the vegan thing, but over time, as I shared with him what I was learning and, the different documentaries, and he's a naturally compassionate person, so he got it. And then he realized that dairy also was inflammatory, that it made he had sort of sometimes some arthritis kind of symptoms that were better when he didn't have dairy. So that, he kind of came along, and he's been incredibly supportive. I'm very blessed. And then, I didn't have many friends that were vegan. I had one friend who was the head of our local kind of vegetarian vegan group. So I turned to her for support. And then, over time, actually 6 months after I became vegan, I went to Main Street Vegan Academy, run by Victoria Moran, who I know was on here previously. And that was where I started to build my support network. I started to build this kind of online and global support network of other vegans. And that changed everything. I think we need that support. If everyone around you in your immediate circle is not vegan or doesn't get it about animals or the environment or even the health aspects of plant-based and vegan eating, you need people around you that you can connect with online or in, local groups so that you're not alone. I mean, because there's times I get discouraged and I need my friends like you and other friends who understand what I'm feeling and where I'm coming from. So I don't think at this point I would give up in any way, but there's some people earlier in the journey where they might be more vulnerable to giving up without that support. So I think it's so important.
Yeah, support is essential because you never know when someone might say something to hurt your feelings, or you might feel isolated. It's always wonderful to be able to call your friends.
Exactly. And even, podcasts and programs like this, I think, are so important because I listen to different vegan and plant-based podcasts all the time, and it just kind of helps me feel encouraged, to hear other people speak and share feelings that I can resonate with, and to learn from them. So finding different tools and resources like this are so important.
Yes, they are, definitely. Well, how does a piece of not eating creatures manifest in your life today?
Yeah, it's interesting. Not eating animals and then stopping the dairy and the eggs, it's interesting how freeing it is. I didn't even know, one of the people I interviewed for my book, The Vegan Transformation, they said when they stopped eating animals, it's like a weight lifted off them that they didn't even know they were carrying. And I can relate to that. It's sort of like I'd been carrying a weight and not knowing it, of eating sentient beings that had to suffer, and now realizing, wow, I don't need to eat them and I can thrive without that. It makes me feel lighter and happier and healthier and fulfilled. I know before I became vegan, I thought what do vegans eat? How do they even do this? I know many years ago, I just had no clue. What would you eat? How would you do this? It seemed depriving. And yet when I became vegetarian and then vegan, actually my food palette opened up a million times. I love all these creative, colorful dishes that have spices and seasonings that I'd never tried before. And I used to eat the same thing over and over again when I was a meat eater. The same few meals just rotated over and over again. Now, there's so much variety and color and flavor to what I eat. So I feel lighter and I'm also more fulfilled, which is pretty cool.
Yes, you're right. It opens up a whole new I mean, a whole new repertoire of foods. So it's exciting. And I'm going out of town, and one of my friends wants me to show her how to eat vegan. And she's like, gosh, and she seems, she asked me about, do you drink milk? And I said, yes. And she's like, oh, like it's real, like a big old thing, you know, almond milk and stuff. I said, well, when we're together, you'll see how it's not really this overwhelming thing, you know.
Mhm.
So, you know, yes, it's interesting, and it's,
Yeah.
we can be kind about it is the key. So, what words of encouragement would you give a new vegan that might be struggling with sadness and doesn't know how to go on?
Yeah, when we become vegan, and especially obviously if you look at the suffering of animals, and you see videos or you see, or if you're an advocate and you're out there really seeing it firsthand, it is heartbreaking because I think we've just been so disconnected. And, I know I was, as I mentioned, even growing up in the Midwest where there's a lot of farms, I just had no idea. I didn't see what was going on at all. I never saw the large, confinement, facilities that they keep many of the animals in. I never saw any of that. Um, and I'd never really thought much about the process of how they were raised or the slaughter. But once I read about it and saw videos about it, it does break your heart. And, Claire Mann, who wrote the book Dystopia, she describes this as the burden of knowing. It's like this burden we carry because we've dared to look at, this kind of horrible thing that happens and the suffering with it. So first, I just want to normalize the feelings that, if we feel sad or we feel despair or we feel anger, that those are valid feelings when we see an injustice, and especially when it's one that we've now awakened to and everyone around us seems to be either oblivious to or not interested in or very cut off from. And I guess what I've come to see is, first of all, like understanding that the conditioning is pretty deep, and so understanding that that's part of why others don't see it. And again, this is where, I mentioned Claire Mann. I mean, her work and her book, Dystopia, is very helpful. And then, of course, Dr. Melanie Joy as well with her books about, why we love dogs, eat pigs, and wear cows. And also Beyond Beliefs that talks about communicating with between vegans and non-vegans. I would just say, like, find these resources because there is support out there for how we can navigate this journey. But, first we need to acknowledge our feelings and let them be there. And then we need to learn skills for how to process them and let them move through us so we're not stuck in them. And then how to kind of channel our feelings into more positive ways of advocating or bringing our gifts forward. So just kind of having ways to work through the feelings. And we can talk more about what some of those ways are, definitely. But I just want to first acknowledge that it's understandable we could have those feelings and that we need to incorporate self-care to learn those tools of how to work through the feelings so they don't just get stuck there, because we're not going to be effective if we're stuck in those feelings and not taking care of ourselves. And I love that we have a wonderful person present here, JJ.
Yes, JJ of Vegan Knowledge is here.
Jam session. I like that with JJ, Angela, and Marakita. Definitely. JJ has lots of wisdom on these topics as well.
Yes. Well, I love that you're saying acknowledging, recognizing the feelings, and then allowing them to be. Because I mean, recently I just had someone tell me not to feel something has happening in my life, and not to feel the sadness, but just get up, everything. It's almost like get up and be strong.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that when we acknowledge the feelings, I mean, it's strong to cry, it's strong to
Yes.
allow feelings.
Well, definitely. One thing, I mean, again, in my work as a psychologist, and it doesn't mean that's always easy for me to do this myself. So, like, I'm going to acknowledge this isn't easy, but I've come to realize, like, all our feelings have a purpose. We are created with feelings. They're part of our human experience, and they all have a purpose. The positive ones have a purpose, but also the ones that we view as negative have a purpose. They're there to help us get more in touch with certain things that we need to be in touch with, whether it be our needs or our fears or actions that we might need to take. So just knowing that all feelings are there to kind of help us in some way, even the ones that feel very negative. But the challenge is sometimes we're so allergic to feeling our feelings, like we don't want to feel them, or we're afraid we're going to be overwhelmed by them, that we go in one of two directions. We either push them down and just try to pretend they aren't there and just kind of intellectualize and kind of go on as if we're not feeling beings, or we kind of dwell in them and get stuck in them, and kind of rehash them and replay them with negative thoughts. And so, both are understandable things, but not maybe great places to stay for the long term. So yeah, we do have to get up and keep moving, yet we do need times to stop and pause and have ways that we can acknowledge our feelings. And so different people do that in different ways. It could be journaling, for example. For some people, writing out your feelings is a great way to kind of acknowledge them and release them. For others, things like yoga, meditation, time in nature, time with companion animals or rescued animals, a walk in a beautiful setting, exercise, different kinds of techniques like the emotional freedom technique, which is a tapping on different acupressure points while you're saying different phrases to yourself. You can look that up. Different kinds of breathing techniques, mindfulness, being able to witness our feelings and allow them. Tara Brach has some great stuff on her website about ways we can kind of mindfully hold feelings and be able to allow and let them move through us. So, as vegans, we have a lot of compassion, but if we don't learn ways to include ourselves in our circle of compassion and kind of hold that compassion in a mindful way, we are at risk for what is called empathy burnout, which is where you're feeling the feelings of another and you're doing it in this ungrounded way where you're kind of swept away and over identifying with whoever you're feeling empathy for. And as a therapist, again, we're kind of at risk for that when we're in caregiving roles or advocacy roles, because we're dealing with a lot of suffering. And so we can get caught up in that sometimes. And so we need to have tools to kind of help hold a grounded compassion that includes ourselves. So just kind of, those are some thoughts about, our feelings and how we work through those, and having different tools that we use on a regular basis, like not just waiting till things build up, but just different tools that, I think we've all heard that saying, about on the airplane, you have to put your own oxygen mask on. And yes, it's been maybe overused as an analogy, but it is true. If we're not putting on our own oxygen mask, we're going to be depleted and not able to help the very causes that we really care about.
Right. And how do you, knowing that you have those feelings and recognizing and feeling them and the energy around them, how do you take care of yourself if someone's getting angry at you? How do you protect your own feelings and space so you're not, really sucked into negativity? What would you recommend like that? Let's just say someone's going to the Thanksgiving dinner and there's going to be a lot of negativity. How do you protect yourself there from being hurt and getting drawn into that negativeness?
Yeah, that's hard. I think, first, hold before you're at such an event that, could potentially be emotionally charged, like you're having Thanksgiving with non-vegan friends or family, for example. You have to decide, what are my intentions and what are my needs, even before you go, if you can. That can be helpful. I'm getting together with family because I want to share special time with them. What is my intention here? So I think it's deciding what you need even ahead of time for, and taking some proactive responsibility. So I know some vegans that just they tell me they literally can't be around me. So they make a decision like they're not going to be at that Thanksgiving and maybe meet up with family later for like something else, for an activity or just a drink or a vegan dessert. Others of us, we're going to be at that Thanksgiving, but we're going to bring lots of vegan side dishes and, have lots of great food to share. And so then if something comes up at that event that really is upsetting or unsettling, like, again, breathing, deciding what's helpful right now for me to respond. Sometimes we're human, we're going to get angry back. That's just sometimes going to happen. But at the same time, realizing if we're always doing that, is that serving us or what we want to do here? So we might take a deep breath. We might take a step back. We might say, this isn't really the time to have this conversation. If you want to talk about this further, I'm happy for us to talk at another time, other than at this family gathering or, kind of, you can sort of set some boundaries around when you're willing to talk about things. If you sense that someone's not at all open to a real conversation, you can just say, look, I don't want to have this conversation. This isn't seeming like it's going to be productive. So, sometimes it's just so individual deciding how you want to respond. But I think being intentional about what is it I really want to create here? Like, what's my relationship with this person? What do I want our relationship to be like? And what do I want for the bigger picture? Like, if I'm really looking at, does this help what I care about most? Some conversations are worth it and others we might just decide are not. And so really being peaceful with yourself that, you're not going to change everybody. Sometimes just it's okay to decide something isn't productive.
Well, that's very important to know, to be okay with not changing everybody. And that takes a lot of pressure off. So
yes. And like, you can share how you feel. Like, I think sharing in terms of I language, like, I once felt such and such a way too, but over time, this is what I've discovered, or, I used to see it that way, whatever way that they're saying, if you did. But now I've come to see this, that, or, now I understand this differently because of my experiences. So, I think when you share things in terms of your own journey and show compassion that you weren't always where you are now, like, that does sometimes make people more open to hearing you. They don't feel as judged by what you're saying, as if like suddenly you're this perfect person who has all the answers, but rather like you're human. You bought into the same system at one point, as all of us did. And now you've come to see it differently, and you're sharing your discoveries and how it's helped you. I think that's the other thing too, is like, we need to share the positives of this lifestyle. It's not just about, the bad things we're avoiding, which is certainly important, but there's many good things we're gaining, and that's actually what my book research was really about, was showing the positives of this lifestyle.
Yeah, let's talk about your book and how that came into being, The Vegan Transformation.
Sure, I'm excited to. So about 3 years ago, I started doing research for it, and I surveyed and interviewed vegans to discover their journeys of how in mind, body, and spirit, like, they'd experienced positive changes from this lifestyle. So, part of what made me want to write it is I knew a lot of women through a transformational coaching program that you and I were both part of at one time, and through other, spiritual things I'd been part of, people who valued caring for the planet and for animals and for humans, but yet they weren't vegan. And I just realized there's so many people that, you'd think they'd embrace this compassionate lifestyle, but, just like me until, not that long ago, they haven't, And also, I felt like many people who are not vegan, as I mentioned earlier, see it as depriving instead of seeing the abundance that's possible with it. So, and yet I knew so many vegans that felt like their life had been transformed. Like, they felt more empowered, they felt happier, they felt healthier, more fulfilled from honoring their values. So I wanted to capture that because I knew there was a lot of research about the physical benefits of a vegan lifestyle, but there wasn't as much about like about the emotional and spiritual benefits. So that's what I wanted to study in my research. So I had a survey, and then I did follow-up interviews with about 75 of the people that I had surveyed. And basically the things I was looking at is what are the positive changes in your life, emotionally, socially, spiritually, since you became vegan? And then what were any challenges you had, and how did you overcome those? And so my book shares the core findings that came from the surveys and interviews. And there were really 7 core transformations that came through that the majority of people were saying happened as a result of their vegan journey. And, it had to do with things like being aligned with our values, opening our circle of compassion, finding greater purpose, feeling more fulfilled in an authentic way, connecting with like-hearted people, taking charge of our health, not just being at the power of, medicine or procedures, but actually realizing there are things we can do. And then the final one was spirituality, that a lot of people described that they felt more aligned spiritually, and that they discovered they were actually interconnected with all sentient beings and with all of nature. And I didn't ask people, do you feel more connected with all of nature? That just came through like in a lot of my open-ended questions that people just said to me, like, I realized we're all one. I realized we're all interconnected. So it was really cool to see these kind of transformative findings that people shared with me. So in the book, which is coming out next April, the full title of it is The Vegan Transformation, A Journey to Heal Yourself and the World. And it's getting close to, the publisher is doing all the design work and everything. It's getting close to being, there and real. But it'll be fully out by next April. And it is actually available for pre-order on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, which I think if people do pre-order it, it helps those initial numbers, when they count that first week of sales or whatever, to help bring attention to it to more people. So I certainly appreciate anybody that pre-orders. And actually, if you do, please let me know. I think Mariquita will have my website in the description. Let me know, because I will have a class in 2025 for those that pre-order, a special free class. So, but yeah, no, it's super exciting to talk to vegans, to discover the ways that this had affected their life positively, and to also discover how they handled those things that were challenging and, overcame it and empowered themselves to stay committed to a compassionate lifestyle. And it's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, it really is. And we got a comment from JJ here. And by the way, I did pre-order the book, so I'm excited. Everyone pre-order your book. I love that, and I love that your book projects the positives of veganism, its spiritual aspects. Congratulations.
Thank you, JJ.
Yes. And what is spirituality? I mean, a lot of times I hear vegans that say they're not spiritual. And I don't know. I think for myself personally, I think veganism is about spirituality. It's about an energy, a loving energy field that really used to be smaller. But when I became vegan, it really expanded to everything in the world. So what would you say about the word spirituality?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that there's a lot of different ways that people define it. I think some people define it as related to religion and following a specific religious tradition, and others might view it more in a general way as sort of this sense of connection with something greater and or with the earth or the universe or some deeper wisdom. And, there are people that might not identify as spiritual. I'm thinking of a few people I interviewed for my book. Many identified as spiritual in some way, some religious, some kind of non-religious spiritual. There were a few that said, I'm not spiritual. They might say I'm an atheist. And yet some of us would think that they kind of are spiritual because they still had qualities that we often identify with as spiritual, just not maybe religious, that maybe they saw themselves as connected with compassion and with higher moral and ethical convictions that they wanted to live by, So I think, a lot of different people have different views of spirituality, but for me, it's about being connected with something deeper, something wiser, something about love. I happen to come from, a spiritual background, being raised, in a Protestant background, but I guess I really embrace people where they're at, and discovering what that spirituality means to them.
Right. And that is, I think that's the essence of it. It's different things to different people, and there's no right or wrongness about spirituality. And it's also a journey. For myself, I feel like it wasn't only about veganism. It was, I mean, when I it was, I mean, when veganism opened up the doors, and then after veganism came, then I explored more, and I really opened up to the trees and all the other beings like the soil and all the little microorganisms. So that in itself is just expanding more into my spirituality, where I even said to the trees, yesterday, I'm here for you, I love you, I recognize you. And it's so funny because I thought, there's a tree that I've been talking to, and I thought, when I move from here, I'm really going to miss this tree. And I thought, that seems so bizarre.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's an important part of my journey, and I know it really came up with a lot of the people I interviewed, and some mentioned, and I found this too, that they felt more aware of what's going on in nature around them because there was not this disconnect, and that more in touch with intuition. I know that's been true for me. And so for me, spirituality is a foundation in trying to live in a kind of a sometimes not very kind or compassionate world, and that I still hold this deeper faith or journey that I'm following to be part of the solution of creating a more compassionate world, even if it's some small part. I just believe we each have a role to play. We each have a unique thing that we can offer to be part of positive solutions. And, one thing I wanted to share, Mariquita, is you were one of the people I interviewed for my research. And you had a beautiful quote about spirituality that I'd like to share a little bit of. Would you mind if I did that in my book?
go ahead. I don't know which one. I mean, I don't, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I asked you about how you felt spirituality and veganism connected, and you had a great quote. You said, veganism connects with every part of existence. In nature, we can feel our connection with every living being, every tree, every grain of sand. When I put my hand in the soil, I realize that this is a living force. The soil, the trees, and our lives are all connected. Our earth has been disregarded, and this mirrors our sense of disconnection. And then you went on to share about your different ministries you're involved in with your church. And then you said, these ministries are all tied together, and I try to help people see this. Our choice whether or not to eat animals affects all these areas: the earth, healthy living, and animals. And this is the question for us to think about. Are you eating peace, or are you eating pain and suffering? So, beautiful quote. And I really, wanted to share that because I think it's a great way of explaining the connection between what we eat and spirituality and our values.
Well, thank you. I don't remember. I remember us talking about that, and so that was yeah, lovely. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, definitely. And in the book, I cover each of the core transformational areas that I mentioned, and in each one, I share the research that backs why that matters. And then I also share like stories from the people I interviewed that illustrate it, so to me, it's inspiring to hear other vegans' stories about how they are thriving and how they're, how they're overcoming any challenges. And, it lets us know we're not alone.
Right. And Ellen is here, and
Okay.
thank
Hi,
you.
Ellen.
She's also doing what you're doing. Ellen is on the road with her, educating people about how to cook
Oh,
based. What is the class that you both of y'all, well, you're taking and she finished?
Food for Life by PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Yeah. Yeah, I had wanted to take it a long time ago, and I guess part of what made me decide like this was the time is I've become aware that, yeah, Food for Life by Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Um, I became aware that a lot of people, might be curious about veganism for a variety of reasons, whether health or animals or the environment, but they feel blocked because they just don't know how to go about it. They maybe didn't have any examples in their life of what would you eat, just like I used to wonder what would you eat. And so I felt like the Food for Life classes were a great way to bring the how of vegan and plant-based eating into my community. And I see a lot of people suffering from health issues that many of them could be perhaps prevented or reversed or at least lessened if people knew the power of plant-based eating. And I do find too that sometimes, and this was true for some of the people I interviewed for my research, sometimes when people become plant-based, even for health reasons, their compassion for animals opens too, because if you're not eating them anymore, like you're no longer having to defend against what happens to them, you don't have that so much of a disconnect. And so I think what happens for a lot of vegans that become plant-based for more health reasons, they sometimes become more open to the ethical thing over time. And that becomes, and I found that in my research, that happened for many that said their initial motivations were more health, that over time the compassion piece really came in.
Yes, and I have a lot of friends like that, that started with the health aspect and now really embrace the word vegan. So
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think whatever way, whatever road you take to get there, I
Yeah.
welcome it.
Yes. And I think like now we're in a time in history where there are going to be people coming in for all different reasons, because there's going to be somewhere the planet, and what's happening on the planet and the environment, or that's going to be the driving force because it's just so relevant right now. And there's going to be others where, because we're in such a health crisis, that's going to be the driving force. Others, obviously, animals are the thing that bring them in. I think what I found was that the majority of people I interviewed mentioned animal compassion as a primary thing that kept them vegan, even if it wasn't the starting reason. So, and I love what Ellen is sharing there, that the Food for Life program can open doors. Because, yeah, I find that too, that as much as I want to share about animal compassion, sometimes people have a wall up and don't want to hear about that. But yet, if you talk about health and the beauty of plant-based food, people seem to be intrigued, and that can be an entry, way to come in, as Ellen is sharing. It can open doors so that you can talk to them about health, and also showing how the change can be done, because we need skills, for some people, it doesn't just come naturally to do this.
Right, you're right. And let me know if y'all, please let us know if you have any questions and make sure you subscribe. But I remember you saying how in the beginning you weren't this fabulous cook like you are now, a chef, I should say. Fabulous chef. So yes. And now I'm sure you're wowing people at your church with the dinners and everything. And so that is a wonderful way of advocacy that sometimes we forget.
Yeah, it is wonderful. Yeah, like recently we had a meal at our church that was catered, but the caterer just like seemed to have no clue about how to have anything vegan at all. So I ended up being the person to bring the vegan options for those of us that wanted it. And of course, everybody wanted it. I mean, once they saw how good it was, everybody wanted some of that too. Fortunately, I still got some. So, but yes, to be able to share like how delicious vegan food is. A good friend of mine who is not vegan, but loves to cook and has a party for friends every year. Like I gave her one of my favorite vegan cookbooks, and she like will make something from it for when we come over. And I'm just very touched that she's doing that, and she finds that everybody else enjoys it too. So it's neat for people to see. It's not so foreign. It's food, it's just food minus meat and dairy, it's plants. And yes, you're right. I was not a cook before. I just would cook very few different things and often just didn't want to cook at all and just ate what was convenient and comforting. But something shifted when I became vegetarian and then vegan, that I just wanted to cook. I wanted to make this work. And I realized that my own health had to be part of it, because if I wasn't eating the healthiest version of it that I could, like I might not be sustainable. And I needed to be able to be at my best, to stand for what I wanted to stand for. So, and to help others, so that this is a sustainable lifestyle, So.
Yes, people do have questions, and so being gentle and meeting them where they're at is the key. So yeah, really learning more recipes to share, and even offering to do it together, trying to figure the recipes out together.
Yeah, and being inviting so that they feel comfortable reaching out to you.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. What if there was someone that might be watching and they would really like to get in touch with more of their spiritual side, but doesn't really know how? What recommendations might you offer them?
Yeah, I think discovering what path they want to take with that. I mean, obviously there's a lot of amazing books, and sometimes those are ways that speak to us, because it kind of depends. Like, if you want to go to more of a religious service, you can try out different churches in your area or synagogues or, whatever your path is, and try those out. But if you're not sure you want to go to more of a religious route, reading books about spirituality, and then also things like meditation practices, guided imagery, seeing the beauty of the divine in nature, just how magnificent it is. I've also found like some different guided meditations where like one meditation I used to do with clients is called an inner advisor meditation, where you'd like imagine yourself going to a peaceful place and then asking to meet with your own wise inner advisor. And when I'd guide people through this visualization, they'd have different images. It could be like a wise animal guide. It could be a human that they admired that was sort of a spiritual figure. It could be an actual spiritual figure. It could be their wise self. But they would have some image of some wise guide, and then often could ask questions of this guide and get intuitive answers. So I think that that's a way that we can connect with our spirituality, that there is wisdom in us that connects to something bigger, and just sometimes getting quiet, having faith. For many of us, prayer is an important part of our spirituality. Even if you're not sure what's happening as a result of prayer, journaling can be a great way to see, because sometimes when you write down like what you've been praying about, sometimes you see it unfold. There's a great book called Writing Down Your Soul, by Janet Connor, that I use as a journaling guide. And basically she invites you to like write to your higher power or your wise self, and then ask questions and just different things you're struggling with. Share what you're feeling or struggling with, seek guidance. And then as you're writing, you often will find like that's unfolding for you. I actually have a journaling guide for those that are interested in journaling on my website. If you go to my blog, one of my recent blog articles was about journaling on your vegan journey. And so, feel free to check that out, if you need some help in journaling. But I think that's one great way to connect with spirituality, along with meditation and nature and prayer.
And what's your website again?
It's AngelaCrawfordPhD.com.
Okay. So what creature is there a creature that really is special in your heart?
That's really tough to choose because I think there's so many that I can kind of connect with. I think I definitely connect with different kinds of cats, both wild cats and domesticated. I definitely have been a cat person. Sometimes I have an image of like a snow leopard too, or kind of the more wild versions. And also I also love, like, when I'm just being out in nature, like connections with like bees and hummingbirds and dragonflies. Just sometimes those kinds of experiences in everyday life make me feel like there's something kind of mystical or magical sometimes about these encounters.
Yes, those are magical. I love to sit at a pond or a lake and see the little beings, the little dragonflies, and yeah. Well, Angela, I know that you've said a few times that you're an introvert. What would you say to introverts that might be watching? I mean, because I can't see any introvert in you right now. I mean, I wouldn't say she's introverted. Like, so what tips would you give someone that might say, well, I can't do this. I don't want to get in front of people.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I definitely have always identified, I mean, from early on as an introvert. At first, I didn't like that word, but when I came to understand what it meant, I realized, oh yeah, I truly am an introvert, which basically means you need to recharge after time with people. The extroverts, especially if you score further on the extroverted end of the spectrum, you get more energized after interacting with people. And for most introverts, especially if it's a large group or a party, you're going to get more fatigued and need to recharge. But for those of us that are introverted, or even maybe shy on top of it, I think finding our passion can make all the difference. When you find your gifts and your passion, then it becomes easier because, for example, for me, I don't do great just doing small talk at a gathering. That's just not my thing. But if I'm doing something where I have a clear role and I have like a message I want to share, then it's much easier for me. So knowing like a purpose and having a role to play, that's helped a lot. For me, writing a book was a great way to express my feelings because I express myself better in writing than often I do talking. So finding that way that you can share your gifts. And it doesn't have to be with lots of people. It could be how you express yourself with your family. It could be writing a blog or social media posts that are impactful. It could be working behind the scenes for an animal rights organization or some sort of vegan organization. There's so many different ways you can share your gifts. And actually in my book, I have a section about that, about I share stories and different ways that vegans that I interviewed expressed their purpose. And they were so varied, from more out there kind of roles to more private ways of sharing their gifts. So just knowing that whatever your personality style is, whatever your gifts, there's a lot of different ways you can bring them forward.
Very true. And what would you say your purpose is in this part of your life? Because sometimes it changes.
Yeah, it does change. I definitely feel my purpose is to draw on my past experience because all those years as a psychologist taught me a lot of different things, being there for people, hearing their journeys, helping them make transitions and transformations. So I draw on my past experience of having formerly been a psychotherapist, but now bringing it forward more as an educator and an author and speaker, being able to share life lessons of how we can make positive changes in our life, how personal transformation helps us actually create the world we want to see, and then how can we cope with the inevitable challenges that are going to come up. You know, obviously there are life challenges whether we're vegan or not, but then if you're vegan, there's some specific challenges emotionally and socially that we have to learn to navigate to really sustain and thrive. So I think, you know, my purpose now is to both help pre-vegans who might be curious, you know, to see that this is an inviting and positive lifestyle, and to help those that are on the vegan journey to include themselves in their circle of care so that they can, you know, be as well as possible. And that's going to help them be more of an invitation to others to join us. So that's where I see my purpose. And just for me, it's the whole mind, body, spirit connection, how it all comes together, how veganism brings together so many things that I care about all in one lifestyle choice. And so it just seems so important for our time right now.
Well, it is very important. And for those that might not understand, just what is the difference between, I mean, tell us what transformation is. What's the difference between transformation and change?
Yeah. Transformation is a form of change, but it goes beyond just change into something that is a more dramatic shift, and often in most cases we view it as a more positive shift, you know, although it doesn't necessarily have to be positive, but usually we think of a transformation almost like a metamorphosis, you know, as a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. It's this dramatic, sometimes sudden, but not always, shift in the character of something or the how something or someone is or appears. For me, transformation was like, I think of my transformation going from someone who felt very reserved and quiet, which I'm still reserved in certain situations, but definitely wouldn't be out there sharing my story like this. And someone who didn't cook and thought it was too much of a bother, someone who ate very unhealthy and thought I had to have meat and dairy every day because that's what I was told. Someone who maybe had purpose, but maybe was an overgiver, didn't necessarily include myself in my circle of care. You know, it's easy when we're in caregiving professions like psychology and other things to do that. So I see all that. That's where I was. And then since becoming vegetarian and then vegan, and also other things along the way, like going through Feminine Power transformational coaching certification and learning to listen to my inner voice and realize my needs mattered, my values mattered. All of that was a transformation where now, you know, I'd always had a dream of writing a book. I wrote the book. I'm speaking, even though when I was like in high school, I hated public speaking. So I found something that mattered so much to me that it helped bring out different parts of me that were probably always there, but didn't get fully expressed. And I found even my inner hidden cook. And
I love it. Yes, a blossoming. That's beautiful. Y'all, I want to make sure that you don't forget to go to www.all-creatures.org to check out hundreds and thousands of pages of free resources updated daily, 7 days a week without break, or sign up for our weekly newsletter. And be sure to search vegan churches on our site to find vegan faith-based resources near you. And if you know of a resource that's not on our list, please reach out to our executive director, Tams, at all-creatures.org. And so, Angela, since we have a few minutes left, is there any final thoughts? I mean, we want to know exactly. Tell us your website again and where we can get the book and your final thoughts.
Oh, great. So my website is www.angelacrawfordphd.com. And on my website, you can find, I have blog articles where I write about different aspects of thriving emotionally and socially as a vegan. I have a section with different resources, books and videos and documentaries that can help people wherever they're at on their journey. And I have a section, a tab at the top about my book, which describes the book. And it also has links where you can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble just to read the description or pre-order. So definitely my website is probably the easiest place to go. There's also a contact page. And on that contact page, it has links to my LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. So there's different ways you can follow what's going on. I hope to post a lot more about the book as it gets a little closer. So hopefully there'll be a lot more to share. And I have some great people who are endorsing it. So I'll be able to share more about that later on. But I'm excited, some great people are either helping with my forward and or endorsing it. So that will come out soon as well. But as far as final thoughts, hold a holistic picture for yourself as you're moving on your vegan and spiritual journeys, where this circle of care and compassion that includes you, and yes, of course, includes all sentient beings on our planet, and also includes the different humans around us that are going through different challenges and their journey that may not yet be where we're at or where you'd like them to be at, but yet you just never know when we show up as role models and we're living a full, beautiful, spiritually grounded, compassionate life. It's going to draw people in over time. There will someday, I believe, be a tipping point that helps this to be a bigger transformation beyond our own personal transformation, spills into more of a societal and cultural transformation. That's what I hold the hope for. And, having a vision for that helps us to keep going even when things feel discouraging. I often, will start my day with a vision or a statement that reflects the world that I hope that we're creating. So,
yes, it's beautiful. Intentional.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. And we also have a Facebook group, Angela and I, Empowered Vegans, Voices of Strength for Mother Earth. So please come check out our group. We really want to help people stay encouraged and be there for you.
Yeah. Just it's a positive space, a supportive space for vegans. We all need that support. So between holding our purpose in mind and staying connected to that and staying connected to others who support us and get where we're coming from, all that is super important. So I'm really appreciative to have been invited, Mariquita, to be on here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank JJ and Ellen. And I'm going to really soak in this nice, peaceful wisdom to take care of myself and just to see what transformations are coming in the future. So yes, well, thank you so much, everybody, Angela, and everyone. Have a beautiful, blessed day.
Mm.
Bye-bye.
Bye.